Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back through time, powdered air, candlelit mirrors, and the faint sting of lemon cologne. You're standing in a room that smells like ambition and melted beeswax, holding a pair of silver scissors that could change the course of Europe. You probably won't survive this, at least not without singed eyebrows. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 17, maybe 18, an apprentice in a Parisian barbershop that caters to the sort of men who measure their worth by the stiffness of their collars. You work fast, you listen well, and you laugh at just the right moments. Because in this city, survival is equal parts skill and performance. The year is 1795. France is still catching its breath after the revolution, and you're just trying not to nick anyone's ear. One morning, a soldier strides in, thin, sharp-eyed, with a coat too fine for his pay grade. He asks for a haircut, something efficient, as if style were a military campaign. You comply, combing through his dark hair with a steady hand. He barely blinks while you work. When he leaves, he tips exactly one coin and tells you precision wins battles. You remember the name he gave, Bonaparte. A few months later, your life tilts. Word spreads that the young general has won in Italy, and by some absurd twist of fate, or maybe because his valet recommended you, you're summoned to his quarters. You arrive breathless, your tools wrapped in a cloth bundle, palms sweating so hard you could rinse them for lather. The room smells of ink and gunpowder. Napoleon himself sits before a mirror, scribbling notes while you unpack your brushes. He says, "Make it quick, there's a war to prepare." And there it begins, your curious, improbable career as Napoleon Bonaparte's personal hairdresser. Every snip feels like playing dice with destiny. His hair is thick and unruly, a defiant symbol of the chaos he commands. You try to tame it, and he smirks when he catches your reflection trembling. He says, "Don't be afraid. I've survived cannon fire. A comb won't kill me." You learn quickly that serving an emperor in the making means adapting to moods as much as styles. One day he wants a neat military crop, the next a more regal sweep. You perfect the art of invisible servitude, always present, never noticed, unless you slip. The court around him forms like a thundercloud, generals, advisors, social climbers. You become part of the atmosphere, unseen yet absorbing everything. It's said that barbers are the silent witnesses of history, and you begin to realize how true that is. While others spill blood for the empire, you manage secrets with soap and scissors. You master the latest tricks of the trade. Hair powder, white as snowfall, smelling faintly of lavender is your weapon of elegance. You dust Napoleon's dark curls until they shimmer under candlelight, transforming him from soldier to statesman. The powder is made of starch, ground bone, and perfume, flammable enough to turn a careless spark into a pyrotechnic display. You discover this the hard way, when a courtier's wig nearly becomes a torch. Still, the transformation is intoxicating. Napoleon notices. He tells you once, "You understand presentation. The world believes what it sees." It's your first lesson in power, not the kind that conquers nations, but the kind that shapes perception. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's obsession with appearance was vanity or strategy. Some claim he used his carefully curated image, the neat uniform, the calm hair, to project control amid chaos. You, of course, don't care about theories. You just care that he pays on time and doesn't flinch when the razor grazes his neck. Then come the whispers, the coup of 1799, the new government, the rise of a consul. You don't understand politics, but you know how quickly fortunes shift. When Napoleon finally declares himself first consul, he summons you again. He says, "You've served me well. You'll continue to do so." And just like that, your hands become instruments of empire. Your schedule changes. You travel with him from Paris to campaigns, carrying a chest of combs, oils, and razors worth more than your family's cottage. Soldiers salute you out of confusion. After all, who gets escorted by guards just to cut hair? You begin to notice that while Napoleon trusts generals with nations, he trusts you with his reflection. There's a strange intimacy in grooming power. You stand behind him as he stares into mirrors, lost in thought. He talks to himself sometimes, muttering battle plans between instructions about sideburns. You never respond. You're part of the furniture. Yet, occasionally, he glances at you and asks the oddest questions. Do you think history remembers the man or the myth? You pretend to ponder while brushing stray hairs from his collar. You murmur, "Depends, which one pays better?" He laughs, and for a fleeting second, you're equals. Your reputation grows in the shadows. Courtiers whisper about the imperial barber with hands steady enough to trim destiny. Some noblewomen request your services, curious about the man who touches the emperor's head. You decline, politely. There are limits to loyalty, and besides, I've seen enough powdered scandals for one lifetime. By 1804, when Napoleon crowns himself emperor in Notre Dame, you're behind the scenes, scissors tucked in your pocket, watching him place the crown on his own head. The gesture is pure theater. You can't help but thinking that you too have performed your role, styling the image of an empire. That night, you celebrate quietly with a flask of cheap wine in your cramped quarters. You stare at your hands, calloused, stained with pomade, and think about how strange it is that history might hinge on something as simple as presentation. You've learned the truth of your trade. No matter how mighty the man, every ruler needs someone to make him look composed before the mirror. Outside, fireworks light up Paris, and somewhere amid the noise, you realize that the boy who once swept hair in a barber shop now grooms an emperor. The scissors gleam beside you in the candlelight, small and ordinary, yet sharp enough to slice through fate itself. And as you drift toward uneasy sleep, you can't help but smiling at the absurdity of it all. Tomorrow, you'll be powdering greatness again, hoping, as always, that greatness doesn't sneeze. The mornings come early now, and you wake before the emperor. The palace air smells of coffee and damp velvet, and the marble floors chill your bare feet as you shuffle toward the dressing room. Outside, the city stirs under the weight of empire. Inside, you are the first sound Napoleon hears each day, the faint snip of scissors, the rhythmic rustle of cloth, the whispered question, "The usual, sire?" You've learned to read his moods by the texture of his hair. On battle days, it's wiry and stubborn, refusing the comb. On diplomatic mornings, it falls into place easily, like a man rehearsed for charm. Today, though, it's restless, just like him. He's pacing as you unpack your kit, muttering about troop movements. You listen without listening, your hands steady, your mind drifting somewhere between the mirror and the man. Your tools have grown finer over the years. The scissors are gold-plated now, a gift from Josephine herself. The comb is carved from tortoiseshell, smooth as a secret. You keep them polished like relics, not out of vanity, but survival. Nothing invites Napoleon's fury faster than inefficiency. You've seen generals reduced to whispers after one misplaced gesture, but somehow you never fear him. You've seen him in slivers, snoring. It's hard to tremble before a man whose hair you've seen flattened by pillow creases. As you work, you catch fragments of history forming in the mirror, maps sprawled on tables, orders sealed with wax, generals arriving at dawn. Napoleon glances at you occasionally, as if your presence steadies him. "You know," he says one morning, "a man's discipline begins with his grooming." You hum in agreement. "And his downfall?" you ask lightly. He smirks. "Neglect." You'll remember that. Historians still argue whether Napoleon truly slept only 4 hours a night, or if that was part of his myth-making. You can confirm one thing: the man never seemed to stop moving, even when sitting. His leg bounced, his fingers drummed, his thoughts sprinted ahead of the world. You sometimes wonder if his mind ever truly rested, or if that relentless motion is what kept the empire alive for so long. Your life now follows the drumbeat of his ambition. You ride in carriages behind generals, your trunk of oils and razors treated like military equipment. Soldiers call you Monsieur Tondeur, the clipper. They laugh, but also salute. They know whose hair you cut. And when Napoleon emerges from his tent immaculate amid mud and chaos, they see something divine, something untouchable. You created that illusion. It's not all war in wax. Court life blossoms like mildew, fast, extravagant, and faintly rotten. You attend banquets where powdered wigs brush chandelier crystals, and where everyone smiles too wide. Josephine flits through rooms like a perfume bottle come alive. You sometimes style her hair too, and she treats you kindly, in the absent way people treat cats. She asks what Napoleon says when she's not there. You lie gracefully, as any good servant must. One night at Malmaison, a nobleman corners you over champagne. He says, "Tell me, what does he look like before battle?" You smile, polite but cryptic. You reply, "Like a man who already knows the outcome." The nobleman nods as if you've revealed a great secret. You don't mention the tremor you sometimes see in Napoleon's hands before dawn. Rumors cling to your profession. People think you hear everything, and they're right. You overhear arguments about succession, whispered threats from marshals, and Josephine's muffled sobs after another affair. You pretend you don't. You've become fluent in selective deafness. The empire grows, so do the mirrors. You travel to Milan for the coronation of the King of Italy, Napoleon himself again, naturally. You style him in a borrowed palace chamber, the air thick with incense and ambition. He looks into the mirror and says, "I look taller today." You grin. "That's a haircut, sire." He chuckles, and for a fleeting second, you feel like the only person allowed to joke with him. Later, you realize that humor is a privilege granted only to those who pose no threat. You are safe precisely because you're invisible. The perfect confidant is the one history forgets. Your mornings grow heavier. The clatter of sabers mixes with the scent of bay rum and powder. You trim generals, too, by Napoleon's request. If they look sharp, they think sharp, he insists. You oblige, your scissors flashing in lamplight, while men discuss conquests between snips. It's absurdly intimate, how power hides behind small vanities. One afternoon, you're summoned to the field after Austerlitz. The emperor's tent reeks of smoke and sweat. He's won, of course. He sits before you, exhausted, yet radiant. You towel the grime from his face while he mumbles about destiny. "Do you believe in fate?" he asks suddenly. You hesitate. "I believe in habit," you answer. You build one stroke at a time. He grins faintly. Then habit has just conquered half of Europe. That night you sit outside the tent, cleaning your combs under a sky heavy with stars and cannon echoes. Soldiers celebrate around campfires. You wonder if your scissors are too instruments of conquest in their own quiet way. After all, presentation wins hearts, and hearts win empires. The next campaign takes you to Vienna, where aristocrats faint at the sight of French uniforms. You follow Napoleon into marble halls where mirrors reflect 1,000 versions of your master, each one rehearsed, deliberate. You fix his collar as he prepares to meet diplomats. He murmurs, "History is a haircut. It grows uneven if you don't keep trimming." You laugh softly. Then you suppose you're Europe's barber. In Vienna, you discover the new rage, scented pomade made from bear fat and violet oil. You test it cautiously. Sticky, cloying, but irresistible. You mix your own version, lighter and sharper, which Napoleon prefers. Soon the court calls it l'essence impériale. You've accidentally become a perfumer too. The empire enters its golden phase. Every morning, the same ritual: warm water, a linen towel, a faint scent of verbena. The emperor allows no delay. The mirror becomes a shrine to control. But sometimes in its reflection, you see fatigue creeping in, the eyes dimmer, the hair thinning slightly. You master new tricks, brushing forward, softening edges, disguising mortality. Power, after all, must appear timeless. Historians still argue whether Napoleon was truly vain or merely theatrical. You suspect both. Vanity is a form of strategy. It keeps despair at bay. And perhaps you think that's why he keeps you close. In a world where everyone lies for gain, you lie for grace. One evening you catch your own reflection beside his in the mirror. You look older than you remember. Lines of powder and worry carved into your skin. You think, I've followed him from salons to battlefields, and somehow I'm still invisible. Yet part of you likes it that way. The mirror needs both faces to tell its truth, the conqueror and the one who keeps him composed. And so, day after day, you polish his legend with a brush dipped in oil and patience, never realizing that one day, when the empire cracks, it's your hands that will preserve what little remains. For now, though, the scissors gleam, the empire hums, and you move like a shadow beside the brightest flame in Europe. Steam curls upward from the copper basin as you wring out a towel, the scent of verbena thick in the air. Napoleon sits before you, eyes half-lidded, a man caught between exhaustion and obsession. The mirror fogs gently, softening his reflection. You dab his forehead, and for a moment, he's not the emperor of half of Europe, just another man too tired to sleep. This is when the secrets come. Not from him, necessarily, but from the world around him. Whispered through the tent flaps, exchanged between maids, carried on letters still wet with perfume. You are the one constant witness, the ghost with a comb. The wars, the treaties, the mistresses, all pass through your periphery like scenes from a stage play you're too polite to interrupt. You've learned the art of silence so well that even walls trust you. But silence doesn't mean ignorance. You know the private scent of empire, fear, sweat, and expensive soap. And you know that every revolution leaves residue, powder on collars, ink smudges from unsigned orders, stray curls swept hastily under rugs. Today, Napoleon is preparing for another council meeting, and you're smoothing his hair while he mutters about betrayal in the ranks. His voice is low but steady, each word clipped like a command. People talk too much. Loyalty these days is a luxury. You smile faintly. Good thing loyalty costs me nothing but soap. He chuckles, almost sincerely. Historians still argue whether Napoleon truly trusted anyone. You, standing this close, suspect not. Trust, in his world, is a delicate hairstyle, maintained only until the wind changes. You've seen it firsthand. Courtiers flatter, generals grovel, even Josephine's affection comes and goes like perfume in warm air. Yet Napoleon never doubts you. Perhaps it's because your power lies in discretion. Perhaps it's because he's too pragmatic to imagine a barber plotting rebellion. Or maybe, deep down, he simply enjoys having one person who never demands anything but a head to comb. One afternoon, while trimming his sideburns, you overhear something dangerous. Two aides arguing just outside the tent. You can't catch all the words, but treachery and poison hiss through the air like serpents. Napoleon hears it too. His jaw tightens. When the aides enter moments later, their faces polished with false calm, you see his reflection glance at you, a flicker of shared understanding. You say nothing. You are, after all, only the hairdresser. Still, you start to notice small things. Certain bottles on his vanity sealed with new wax. Cups left untouched. Josephine's absence stretching longer each time she visits Malmaison. You sense the invisible cracks forming in the Empire's mirror long before anyone else dares to speak of them. You try to distract yourself with craft. New pomades arrive from Italy, some made with bergamot, others with an odd mixture of rosewater and whale oil. You test them all on willing courtiers, keeping notes like an apothecary. Napoleon prefers simplicity, though. "I don't need to smell like a garden," he insists, "just like victory." You still wonder what that scent would be. Gunpowder and citrus, maybe? Paris, meanwhile, hums with gossip. They call you the Emperor's Mirror. Some claim you've seen secret letters burned. Others whisper you hide messages in pomade tins. A few even insist you know the true reason behind Napoleon's sudden bursts of temper. You don't correct them. Let mystery be your shield. One evening, while traveling to Munich, you find yourself seated beside a group of officers in a carriage. They drink, loudly, to the Emperor's endless glory. One of them leans toward you, slurring. "Tell us, Master Barber, does he ever talk of us?" You shrug, eyes half shut. "Only when you need haircuts." The laughter breaks the tension, and they toast again. But beneath their mirth, you hear doubt, a tremor that no razor can smooth away. Later that night, alone in your small quarters, you polish your scissors and think of all the voices you've heard. It occurs to you that you've become a living archive. Every secret, clipped, brushed, or whispered within arm's reach of power. You wonder if historians centuries from now will ever guess that the true witness of empire wasn't a general or diplomat, but a man holding a towel. A week later, while preparing Napoleon for a portrait sitting, he surprises you. "You're unusually quiet," he says, "thinking." You nod. Always. He studies your reflection for a long moment. "You see too much," he murmurs. "But perhaps that's what keeps me honest." You nearly laugh. Honesty isn't a luxury emperors can afford. Then a curious moment. Napoleon asks you to trim his hair shorter than usual. "Less pomp, more soldier," he explains. You obey, but it feels like erasing part of the myth you helped create. The cropped look hardens his features, makes him less ethereal, more human. You wonder if he senses his power shifting, or if he's simply tired of his own reflection. The portrait session that follows is tense. The artist complains about shadows, Napoleon snaps about deadlines, and you, ever invisible, adjust a single lock of hair until everything feels composed again. Later, when the painting is unveiled, it becomes one of his most famous, the emperor with the calm of a god and the haircut of a pragmatist. Only you know how much anxiety went into that illusion. Historians still argue whether that portrait was propaganda or honesty disguised as grandeur. You decide it was both. The years pass, the empire expands, and your toolkit becomes as worn and storied as any weapon. Each comb bears scratches from different campaigns, Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram. You keep them polished like medals. Once, a soldier asks if you've ever seen battle. You grin, only in the mirror. But the secrets keep multiplying. You overhear a conversation between diplomats about Josephine's inability to bear an heir. That night, you're summoned to prepare Napoleon for an important dinner. His face is unreadable.
his silence heavier than usual. As you trim, he asks softly, "Do you think a man can command love as he commands armies?" You answer truthfully, "No, sire. Love resigns even when armies don't." He says nothing, but when you finish, you see his eyes glisten faintly in the glass. You realize then that your job is not just grooming, it's the maintenance of illusion. You don't just shape hair, you shape how the world sees its conqueror. Yet beneath every perfect curl, there's a story waiting to unravel. That night, in your small chamber adjoining his, you hear Napoleon pacing. The floorboards creak like strained nerves. You think about all the secrets floating through these halls, unspoken, steaming in the air like the fog from your morning towels, and you wonder if they'll ever condense into something heavy enough to drown you both. Still, you keep your silence, because silence for you is not submission, it's survival. And as you drift into uneasy sleep, you imagine the empire itself as one enormous hairstyle, magnificent, fragile, and doomed to collapse under its own powder.
The scissors click in rhythm with your heartbeat as the candlelight flickers across the mirror. You've begun to think of time, not in years, but in hairstyles. The subtle changes that mark Napoleon's shifting moods and the empire's swelling pulse. Tonight, you're preparing him for yet another ceremony, one of those endless coronations, dedications, or imperial reaffirmations that keep Paris spinning like a gilded carousel. You've long stopped asking what half these events are celebrating. When you're the emperor's hairdresser, every day feels ceremonial. Still, this one matters. The crown must glitter, the curls must hold, the legend must breathe. You swirled pomade between your fingers, a concoction of your own making. Beeswax, bergamot, and a dash of something secret that gives it that faint metallic sheen. It's the scent of power disguised as cleanliness. Napoleon sits silently, eyes fixed on his reflection. You can tell he's tired. His hair's grown thinner. The once rebellious curls now behave with eerie obedience. You know better than to mention it. A little more volume, perhaps, you suggest gently. "Yes," he murmurs. "Make me look unstoppable." And so you do. You puff, twist, and sculpt until the mirror reflects not a man, but a myth. The generals waiting outside whisper about troop movements and treaties, but your battlefield is here, among combs and cologne. You've discovered the strange power of presentation. When the emperor looks flawless, the world believes his empire is too. Historians still argue whether Napoleon truly believed in his own invincibility or just acted the part. You suspect it's both. Every morning, when you hand him the mirror, he stares not at his reflection, but at his destiny. And destiny, as you've learned, must always appear well-groomed. Your fame grows quietly. Aristocrats now seek your mixtures: imperial wax, elixir of valor, pommade du triomphe. You never intended to start a trend, yet suddenly, soldiers and courtiers alike carry small tins of your recipe, claiming it brings luck in battle. You'd laugh if it weren't so profitable. One afternoon, while polishing Napoleon's boots, a task he insists no one else can manage without scratching the shine, you catch the faint hum of a rumor. An aide mutters that foreign chemists are studying cosmetic chemistry, trying to improve dyes and perfumes with actual science. The idea fascinates you. Could scent be engineered the way strategy is? You begin experimenting in secret, blending oils, distilling herbs, even sneaking into apothecaries to buy ingredients under false names. That's how you invent your most peculiar creation yet, a hair powder mixed with crushed pearl and alcohol. It gives the emperor's hair a celestial shimmer under candlelight, like frost in summer. The court loses its mind over it. Ministers whisper that even Jupiter would envy such a glow. You just hope no one gets too close, because one stray flame could turn the entire imperial salon into a fireball. Joke 1. You once caught a lady-in-waiting trying to light a candelabra near Napoleon's head, and for a split second, you saw your life flash before you. Mostly unpaid bills and scorched wigs. Paris in this era smells like vanity. Burnt powder, ambergris, and ambition. You sometimes stroll the boulevards in disguise just to watch the chaos your craft has unleashed. Perfume sellers shout your name, though they've never met you. A barber on Rue Saint-Honoré claims to be your cousin and charges double. You consider confronting him, but honestly, you're flattered. Napoleon, meanwhile, grows restless. "Europe bores me," he grumbles one morning as you adjust his collar. "The English need reminding who rules the sea." You nod, distracted by a cowlick that refuses to obey. "Careful, sire. The sea can be fickle, like hair on a humid day." He laughs, a short, sharp sound. "Then let's tame it." Soon after, you're packing again. Combs, razors, jars, brushes, all the sacred instruments of illusion. You've grown accustomed to the rhythm of departure, the folding of uniforms, the scent of wax, the muffled dread of soldiers pretending not to be afraid. You've styled him for countless campaigns, but this one feels different. There's a heaviness in the air, the kind that clings to mirrors long after the candles die out. On the road, your salon becomes a tent. Your tools rattle in their case as cannons echo in the distance. You cut hair beside maps stained with wine and blood, your scissors glinting like tiny sabers. When Napoleon emerges to address his troops, his hair perfectly composed, they cheer as if order itself had descended from chaos. You realize then, your small rituals, the brushing, the oiling, the shine, hold the empire's illusion of control together. Historians still argue whether such ceremonies mattered, whether presentation truly influenced morale. But you've seen it firsthand. An army that believes its emperor cannot be ruffled fights harder than one that knows he sweats. Of course, not every day is glorious. You've had disasters, like the time a new pomade froze solid during a snowstorm and you had to thaw it over a campfire, narrowly avoiding turning the emperor's tent into a chimney. Joke 2. The next morning, he remarked that his hair smelled like victory and beef stew. Yet even in chaos, you find moments of strange intimacy. Late nights, when the camp quiets and the emperor allows himself a rare glass of brandy, he talks more freely. "They think I crave power," he says once, staring into the dim mirror. "But really, I crave control over everything, even time." You nod, pretending to dust powder from his shoulders. "Then, sire, I suppose you should never grow old." He glances at you through the reflection, eyes narrowing. "That's your job, isn't it?" You laugh, softly, but his tone leaves you uneasy. You can't stop time, and no amount of powder hides fatigue forever. The mirror, patient and cruel, will eventually betray both of you. Still, you persist, because what else can you do? Your hands were made for this, steady, practiced, and unseen. And perhaps in their own way, they've shaped history more than a dozen speeches ever could. In quieter moments, you write in your journal, a habit you've picked up from boredom and self-preservation. Every empire requires its illusions. I am the custodian of his. You tuck the notebook away, unaware that someday those pages will be found and debated by scholars who will insist they reveal the psychological scaffolding of power. You smirk at the thought. Let them argue. You're too busy figuring out how to keep the emperor's sideburns symmetrical. And so the scissors click again, soft as rain. Outside, the empire grows louder, brighter, and closer to breaking, though you can't see it yet. All you know is that when the crown gleams under the chandeliers and the curls hold fast through the night, the illusion endures a little longer. Joke 3. You once told a new valet that your job was making chaos look fashionable. He believed you and started wearing cologne from gun oil and orange peel. It caught on for a week before everyone decided it smelled like defeat. Tonight, as you step back from the mirror, Napoleon rises and inspects your work. He nods once, satisfied. Perfection, he says, as though the world outside isn't burning. You bow slightly, hiding the tremor in your fingers. For now, the illusion is intact. Tomorrow will bring another battle, another ceremony, another morning where power begins with a comb and ends in smoke. The morning mist hangs low over the camp, heavy and damp, clinging to your coat like a stubborn curl. You trudge through mud and the faint smell of gunpowder, leather, and hay, your toolbox slung across your shoulder. Napoleon waits inside the tent, already awake, pacing like a restless storm. You hear the soft scrape of his boots, feel the tension in the air, and know that today the empire's pulse is just a heartbeat away from chaos. You set down your case, pulling out brushes, scissors, and pomade, each piece familiar in weight and purpose. Napoleon watches you, eyes narrowing, his gaze sharper than any general's sword. We march at dawn, he says, voice low but urgent. Make me look like a man who controls armies, not a man who shivers in the cold. You nod, letting your hands glide through his hair, shaping it with practiced precision. Each strand responds to your fingers, the pomade giving it a faint sheen that catches candlelight, like the glimmer of strategy in the midst of uncertainty. Outside, aides scurry about, delivering maps, unrolling plans, whispering rumors. You overhear fragments of conversation, a Russian advance, a supply shortage, the rumor that a certain marshal has been plotting behind the emperor's back. You keep your expression neutral, as you always do, but your mind catalogs every word. The hairdresser is, after all, an invisible archivist. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's meticulous grooming before battles affected morale. You know from experience that it does. A well-combed emperor inspires confidence. An unkempt one invites doubt. Soldiers glance at him, then at the horizon, and somehow feel steadier. You wonder, not for the first time, whether the same principle applies to entire empires. Polish the surface, and the cracks seem smaller. You pause to adjust a stubborn curl, one that resists your efforts as if aware of the tension gripping the camp. Napoleon watches you silently, his expression unreadable. "What do you see?" he asks, quietly. You shrug. Only what everyone else sees. Order, precision, control. He leans back, almost imperceptibly, as though testing the truth of your words. "Good," he mutters. "Let them believe." The morning drags on. You move with the rhythm of the tent, brushing away stray hairs, blending oil into sideburns, making small adjustments while the emperor mutters about troop formations and the folly of allied generals. Outside, the wind carries rumors, some amusing, some deadly. One officer complains about frozen rations, another brags about clever espionage. You smile faintly, thinking about how many lives are decided by chance, by rumor, by the smallest details. And yet here, In this tent, one careful combing could stabilize an entire morale. Joke 1. You once remarked that a soldier might die on the battlefield, but a single rogue cowlick could ruin the emperor's dignity. Napoleon had laughed, sharp and short, then asked if you'd ever considered charging by the curl instead of cannon. The afternoon brings letters, reports, and the faint smell of smoke drifting in from nearby campfires. You sit on a low stool, combing through tiny tangles as Napoleon speaks of campaigns past, lessons learned, and the fickle nature of fortune. You listen, adjusting hair in subtle motions, feeling history pass through your fingers like soft silk. A strange, fringe detail intrudes. One aide mutters that certain hair powders in the army contained crushed pearls, intended to impress the enemy if captured. Napoleon overhears this, frowning slightly. "Ridiculous," he mutters. Yet he allows you to mix in a touch of pearl dust into his pomade that evening. Subtle, glittering, a hidden signature of vanity and superstition. The sun sets slowly. The tent glows amber, shadows lengthening, soldiers murmuring outside. You finish your task, step back, and let the mirror reflect your work. Napoleon studies himself, expression unreadable, then nods. "Perfect," he says simply. No one else could have understood the hours, the care, the small impossible decisions that turned a man into a symbol. You smile faintly. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's meticulous grooming contributed to his aura, or whether it was merely vanity. You know better. Power, after all, is often measured in inches of sideburn and ounces of confidence. You pack your brushes and scissors for the evening, moving quietly as the camp settles. Outside, the world continues to churn, but inside the tent, calm persists. You glance one last time at the emperor's reflection. The battle waits for morning. The hair is ready. The illusion endures. You wake before dawn to the sound of scissors clicking. Not yours, but someone else's, sharp and impatient in the hallway. You roll over on your narrow cot, the smell of pomade and candle wax thick in the air, and realize the noise belongs to one of the court attendants rehearsing his flattery for the day. You smile. Even the flatterers are getting nervous now. Paris feels tense, stretched thin like hair drawn too tight under a comb. The air hums with the whisper that the emperor's grip might finally slip. You stand, splash water on your face, and look into the small mirror above your basin. There's a streak of gray at your temple now, probably earned the day Josephine threw a perfume bottle at your head for trimming too much from her fringe. You chuckle softly. Even in chaos, people still care about curls. By the time you reach Napoleon's chambers, he's already pacing in his dressing gown, a letter crushed in his fist. "You've heard the news," he mutters. You haven't, but you nod anyway. He drops into his chair, and you begin to part his hair. Still thick, though coarser now, the scalp tighter with stress. "They think they can cut me out," he says, almost whispering, "but I have sharper blades than they do." You pause mid-snip. "Careful," you say lightly. "I'm holding one." The line earns a faint smirk, your daily victory. You work in silence after that, just the rhythmic snip and the soft drag of a comb. The mirror reflects both of you, the emperor's weary stare and your steady hands. History, distilled to a haircut. Outside, Paris hums with intrigue. The salons where you used to gossip about ribbons and rouge now echo with code words, rumors, and revolutionary plots. You visit one that evening under pretense of delivering new pomade, and there she is, Camille, the chemist turned courtesan, who once helped you develop Napoleon's favorite hair tonic. She leans close, perfume sweet and sharp as betrayal, and whispers, "The Bourbons are coming back. You should choose your side." You shrug. "My side is whoever's head sits in my chair." She laughs, but her eyes don't. Historians still argue whether the hairdressers of the imperial court were spies, whether people like you slipped coded notes inside powder boxes or passed messages through the placement of a ribbon. You never confirm it, but the night after your talk with Camille, a note appears under your door. They watch your scissors now. For the next week, every haircut feels like a gamble. One wrong movement, one nervous glance, and the guards might drag you out for questioning. You start cutting faster, lighter, letting conversation flow to distract suspicion. Napoleon talks less these days, though. He stares at the mirror and sees something beyond reflection. Maybe all the battles he's fought, or the ones still waiting. Once, while you trim, he asks suddenly, "Do you believe power fades like hair?" You think about it. It grows back, but never the same. He nods, as if that settles it. The next morning, the palace corridors echo with angry boots. Ministers, officers, advisors, everyone talking at once. You catch bits of words: abdication, betrayal, coalition. You know better than to ask questions. Instead, you pack your scissors, combs, and vials into your worn leather case, just in case. That night you're summoned again, not to Napoleon's chambers, but to Josephine's former dressing room. It's now a temporary meeting space for the Empress Marie-Louise. She wants her hair powdered in mourning style, muted, grayish, modest. You comply, layering soft clouds over her curls, while she asks quietly, "Do you think he'll survive this?" You could lie. Instead, you say, "He's survived worse." You think of the battles, the smell of gunpowder, the screams, the rivers of mud, and realize survival is a kind of illusion. The emperor may live, but his empire? That's already unraveling strand by strand. One evening, as you walk the palace halls, you pass a group of soldiers arguing over a box of jewelry, loot, probably. One of them holds up a locket, a tiny curl of dark hair inside. You stop. Not just any hair, Napoleon's. They've begun to sell fragments of the man before he's even fallen. You offer them a fair price, and take it, more out of instinct than loyalty. Later, alone in your quarters, you set the locket on your table beside your scissors and whisper, "Not yet." Rumors spread that he's being sent away to Elba, a speck in the sea. You hear laughter in the salons again, brittle and bright. People pretend the empire's collapse is fashionable. You pretend you don't care, but you still polish the emperor's combs until they gleam. The day of departure, you accompany him to the carriage. His uniform is simple, stripped of ornament. He turns once, scanning the faces of those who remain. You bow slightly, unsure whether to speak. "You've been loyal," he says, "more than most generals." You smile. "Hair doesn't lie, sire." As the carriage rolls away, the wind lifts the edge of his hat, revealing a streak of white in his hair, a mark you'd hidden for months with clever coloring. You feel oddly proud that the world will now see it, proof that even the mighty gray with time. That night, Paris feels quieter, lighter somehow, though you can't tell if it's relief or grief. You return to your empty quarters, open the locket, and hold that tiny curl of hair up to the candlelight. The flame flickers, and for an instant, the strand glows like a thread of gold. You close it again, carefully. There's talk of following him into exile. Maybe that's madness, maybe that's devotion. Either way, you start packing. The ship smells of salt and despair. You lean over the rail as Elba fades behind you, a smudge of gray rock sinking into the sea, and you can't decide whether you're relieved or heartsick. Napoleon's exile had turned your craft into routine. No grand balls, no powder wars, just a daily trim and philosophical rambling about destiny. When the news came that he'd escaped and was marching north toward Paris, your scissors nearly leapt from your hand. You followed again, of course. How could you not? Now, weeks later, you find yourself in a freezing field somewhere in Poland, then Russia, then somewhere you stop naming altogether. It's just snow, endless snow, crunching under boots and swallowing sound. You trudge beside the baggage train, your comb tucked into your coat, your fingers numb. The emperor refuses to wear a fur hat. Too heavy, he says. So you improvise, wrapping his head in warm cloth during stops, massaging his scalp with melted fat and vodka. It's a strange intimacy, this daily ritual amid war. You sit inside a drafty tent lit by a single candle, scissors glinting like tiny sabers. Napoleon stares at maps while you work, murmuring to himself about flanks and formations. Sometimes he falls silent, eyes half closed, as if your fingers smoothing his hair can momentarily erase the noise of cannons and betrayal. Outside, soldiers gossip. They say your comb is magical, that each stroke brings him luck. You don't correct them. Superstition keeps morale alive longer than strategy. But one night, as snow thickens and wolves howl beyond the camp, a private approaches you shyly. "Monsieur, could you cut my hair too? Maybe I'll live through tomorrow?" You agree, shaping a crude crop by firelight. He thanks you as if you've blessed him. You never see him again. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's march into Russia was madness or inevitability. You, meanwhile, argue with frostbite. Your tools rust, the pomade freezes solid, and when you finally manage to shave the emperor's jaw, you use a blade warmed over a candle. He flinches once, but says nothing. "You're the only one who dares touch me," he mutters. "Everyone else fears the myth. And I'll keep you human, though my voice shakes from cold more than courage." Weeks blur. The retreat begins. The snow deepens until wagons vanish into it like insects in milk. You melt snow for water, you trade a comb for a loaf of bread, and you dream of warm rooms smelling of citrus and soap. Once during a blizzard, you shelter with a few officers inside a ruined church. The altar still stands, dusted with frost. You find a relic there, a small silver mirror, cracked across the middle. You keep it. Later, you'll use it to shave a fallen emperor. The army shrinks, men vanish, swallowed by hunger and winter. Even Napoleon's hair thins. Stress plucks strands faster than you can trim them. You notice a tiny bald spot one morning and decide not to mention it. He probably knows. The man who once commanded Europe now wraps his head in rags, and you, loyal to the end, still keep the angles neat. There's dignity in grooming, even for ghosts. When spring finally breaks, it feels like a miracle and an insult at once. Grass grows over graves before the living can mourn. You return to Paris with a hollow victory and frostbitten fingers that can no longer hold a comb steady for long. But the world doesn't stop for shaking hands. It never does. Napoleon tries to rebuild, to summon glory again. You watch trimming and polishing while France sighs beneath the weight of fatigue. Everyone knows it can't last. Even he must know. You see it in the way he glances at the mirror, like a man checking if his reflection still believes the lie. Then comes the fateful call. Waterloo, the final gamble. You pack your tools without hesitation. At the camp, you hear cannon fire in the distance while you trim his sideburns shorter. "Clean lines," he requests, as though tidiness could tilt fate. You smooth pomade into his hair, the scent of bergamot and smoke clinging to your gloves. You'll win. you say softly, not because you believe it, but because he needs someone to. He does not. You witness the unraveling from a distance, horses flailing in mud, drums like thunder rolling away. You flee with the remnants, your kit bouncing at your side, your heart heavier than the frostbitten marches. Paris again. Defeat again. But this time, there's no exile to soften the blow. You're arrested briefly, accused of being part of the inner imperial circle, but your captors laugh when they hear your profession. A hairdresser? To the emperor? They release you with a sneer. You bow mockingly and walk free. That night, in a cheap room above a cafe, you take out the cracked mirror from the church and study your reflection. You look older than your years, lines etched deep like campaign routes. You hold up a lock of his hair, one of the few you kept from better days, and whisper, "It's over, isn't it?" The candle sputters, the air smells faintly of smoke and pomade. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll find a new head to style. But tonight, you mourn with scissors in your lap and the sound of 1,000 vanished boots echoing in your mind.
You arrive on the island of Elba once more, but this time without the thrill of defiance. The sea sparkles mockingly, calm, blue, as if unaware that it's become the border of an empire shrunken to the size of a pebble. The locals barely look up as your ship docks. They've seen soldiers before, exiles before, men who once thought the world would never go on without them. Napoleon steps ashore in his plain uniform, face drawn tight, eyes still burning. You trail behind with your leather case, the one that smells faintly of lavender oil and history. Inside, scissors, comb, a cracked silver mirror, and the last curl of hair from a man who was once a god. Life on Elba moves slowly, like a forgotten melody. You set up a modest salon in a small, whitewashed room near the governor's house. The emperor visits every day or two, not for vanity anymore, but for conversation. He sits, silent at first, letting you trim and brush while sea wind rattles the shutters. "Tell me," he says one morning, "do they still fear me out there?" You hesitate. "They fear your memory, sire." He smiles faintly. "Good. That means I'm not dead yet." You keep him tidy, sharp. His hair still disciplined, his sideburns exact. It's your small rebellion against decay. Sometimes he insists on paying you, slipping a corin into your palm with theatrical ceremony. Other times, he just talks. About Egypt, about Russia, about destiny as though it's a lost lover. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's exile was a humiliation or a strategy. You think it's a bit of both. He spends hours dictating his memoirs, pacing like a caged lion. You often listen, comb in hand, as he revises the past mid-sentence. "Write that I was betrayed by fortune, not by men." You raise an eyebrow. "Fortune doesn't fire muskets," I murmur, earning his rare soft laugh. At night, when the island quiets and cicadas hum, you sometimes wander the rocky coast. You find bits of coral, shells, and once, strangely, a tuft of goat hair tangled in seaweed. You pocket it, thinking it might do for a new brush. Your hands have grown slower, stiffer. You miss the rhythm of Parisian salons, the rustle of silk skirts, the soft arrogance of courtiers. But here, there's only the sound of waves and the scratch of Napoleon's pen. The emperor grows restless. You can feel it in the way he taps the chair as you work, in the sudden intensity of his gaze when he stares at the horizon. One morning he says, "If I return, will France still love me?" You snort softly. "France always loves whoever cuts her best figure." He grins. "Then she'll remember me." You don't realize he's serious until weeks later, when ships begin to arrive quietly in the night. Men with familiar faces, worn uniforms, whispers of destiny rekindled. You catch snippets while trimming his hair. March on Paris, the 100 days, the eagle rises again. You keep cutting, because it's easier than asking questions that might cost your life. Before he departs, he calls you into his study. "You'll stay," he says, voice firm. "Someone must keep record of my better image." He gestures to a box, a collection of combs, razors, and one gilded mirror. "Guard these. They're relics now." You protest, but he waves you off. "Every conqueror needs a chronicler. You'll be mine." And then he's gone. The island feels emptier than ever. You hear news in fragments, a British frigate passing, a trader whispering of battles, of a triumphant return, of another fall. Each story contradicts the last. Historians will argue for centuries, but you live through it in silence, your scissors idle on the table. One day, you receive a package with no sender. Inside, a lock of hair, unmistakable, sealed in wax. You touch it, reverently, tracing its curl like the line of a vanished crown. There's a note. "For your collection, the Emperor remembers." You keep it hidden under your pillow. Some nights you hold it to the candlelight and imagine he's back in your chair, grumbling about generals and dandruff, dreaming of conquest between snips. But days grow long and indistinct. You age quietly, watching the sea glitter as if mocking your patience. The island's gossip turns to other things: fish prices, weddings, weather. Your name becomes a curiosity. The mad hairdresser who once served Napoleon. Children peek through your window and run off laughing. You don't chase them. You just keep cleaning your tools, polishing your mirror, waiting for something, perhaps a ship, perhaps death. Historians still argue whether the lock of hair Napoleon left on Elba was genuine. You could tell them, of course, but you never do. Some mysteries are better left styled, not solved. You are no longer young, and the mirror knows it. Each morning the reflection grows softer around the edges, like watercolor left out in the rain. You live now in a small apartment above a perfume shop in Paris, the air thick with violet powder and memory. The year is gray, the city tired. Everyone pretends to have moved on. But every so often you catch the gleam of a medal under a coat, the faint hum of a marching tune hummed by an old soldier in the street, and you know the emperor never really left. You still cut hair, though your clientele has changed. Bureaucrats, widows, young poets who want the imperial look without understanding what it cost. You smile at them, trim with patience, and never mention that you once shaped the most dangerous hair in Europe. They wouldn't believe it anyway. One afternoon, a portly collector arrives. His gloves squeak as he sets a small velvet box on your counter. "Authentic hair of Napoleon," he declares. You arch an eyebrow. "Authentic according to whom?" He beams. "An officer's widow. She swears it was clipped at Waterloo." You open the box and study the pale brown curl inside. "Too long, too soft. That's from a wig," you say flatly. The man frowns. "Are you certain?" You smile faintly. "I'm the only man alive who would be." After he leaves, you pour yourself a drink and laugh quietly. The city is full of relics now. False relics, true relics, imaginary relics. Hair, letters, buttons, even bits of Napoleon's soap sold to gullible tourists. You once saw a man hawking tiny bottles of water labeled Tears of Elba. The world has turned its conqueror into a carnival souvenir. And yet you too are part of that carnival. In a hidden drawer, you keep 3 strands of his real hair, one from Egypt, one from Austerlitz, and one from that final morning before he rode to Waterloo. You sometimes take them out, hold them up to the light, and whisper to the air, "Still strong." Historians still argue whether Napoleon's locks preserved in museums today are authentic. Some claim arsenic in the strands proves slow poisoning. Others say the samples were switched by servants or lovers. You know the truth, but the truth feels smaller than the myth. It's the myth people need, something shining and impossible to comb smooth. A week later, a publisher visits your shop. He's writing a book about the emperor's human side and wants anecdotes. You indulge him a little. The time Napoleon insisted on trying lemon-scented powder, the time he cut his own fringe crooked before a coronation and blamed you for it, the day he ordered all mirrors removed from camp because they waste courage. The publisher laughs, scribbles notes, and leaves satisfied. You sit afterwards in silence, remembering the smell of gunpowder and pomade, the tremor in your fingers as you tied his cravat before battle. Memory, you realize, is the only empire left untouched by defeat. That night, you dream of him. Not the emperor in uniform, but the man sitting shirtless by a campfire, hair damp, asking if you think history can forgive ambition. You never answered him then. In the dream, you still can't. You wake to the faint echo of drums, or perhaps it's your own heartbeat. The years blur. The perfume shop below changes owners twice. You become an old curiosity. Monsieur Lenoir, Napoleon's hairdresser, people whisper. Sometimes young students visit, eyes wide with disbelief. Is it true, they ask? Did he really have a lock of hair for luck? You grin. He had a whole head of them. They laugh and you let them think it's a joke. One rainy evening, as you close up shop, a woman enters. She wears a simple black veil and carries a letter sealed in red wax. "From St. Helena," she says softly. Your hands tremble as you break the seal. The handwriting is uneven, foreign, but unmistakably his secretary's. Inside, a small packet, lighter than air. A final strand. You open it carefully. The hair is thinner now, silvered with age, but when it catches the light, it glows faintly golden. You don't cry. You just sit, staring, feeling time collapse into itself. The room smells of lavender and sea salt. Outside, Paris murmurs like a restless dream. You place the strand in a new locket, sealing it beside the others. Then you write in neat script, "For history, not for sale." The next day, you visit a jeweler and commission a small silver case engraved with an N surrounded by laurel leaves. He doesn't question it. People are still making Napoleon trinkets 50 years from now, he says. You just smile. Sometimes you wonder if he knows, wherever he is, how his story survived, not in marble or steel, but in strands of keratin and whispers. Maybe that's immortality, not living forever, but being endlessly retold. Historians still argue whether Napoleon's legend began with ambition or ended with vanity. You, sitting in your quiet Parisian room, think it began with a haircut. You wake one morning to sunlight pouring through gauze curtains, soft and gold, the color of memory. The air smells faintly of rosewater. Someone downstairs must have spilled perfume again. Your scissors sit neatly on the dresser beside the silver locket, the one holding his final strand. You open it for a moment, just long enough to see that familiar curve of hair catching the light, then close it gently, as though sealing a prayer. The city outside is quieter now. The carriages make less noise, the crowd seems smaller. Paris has changed her style again. Top hats, side curls, everything cleaner, more restrained. No one talks about the empire anymore, unless it's in past tense, like a fashion season gone out of favor. But sometimes, when you trim a nobleman's hair and he asks for a Napoleonic parting, you can't help smiling. His influence lingers, woven invisibly into vanity itself. You walk the streets in the evenings, cane tapping, coat collar turned up. Children chase each other past lampposts. Vendors shout about new colognes, new powders, new dreams. You catch your reflection in a shop window and pause. The hair is white now, thin as parchment. Well, you murmur, every empire ends in silver. A young journalist recognizes you one afternoon. Monsieur Lenoir, is it true you kept the emperor's hair? His notebook trembles with excitement. You shrug. Hair, my friend, is like memory. Everyone wants a piece of it. He laughs, but you notice he never asks why. That's good. You wouldn't have answered. You've lived long enough to see Napoleon become myth, then metaphor, then merchandise. Every year brings a new portrait, a new opera, a new theory. Historians still argue whether he was genius or tyrant, savior or monster. You sip your tea and think, he was human, and I brushed his hair. In your dreams, you're back in the imperial tent, the air thick with steam and pomade. He sits before you again, shoulders tense, eyes blazing. You lift the comb, parting his hair in steady lines while outside cannons roar. Do you think they'll remember me? You smile. They won't be able to forget. He chuckles, low and dangerous, and for an instant you feel the world tremble again. When you wake, your pillow smells faintly of salt. You don't know if it's the sea, or the memory of him, or just age settling in. One winter afternoon, a snow drifts across the window. You decide to write your own account. Not the battles, not the politics, just the little things. The way he hated the smell of burning hair, how he'd hum off-key when nervous, how he believed lemon oil could cure melancholy. You write slowly, the ink shaking, your handwriting looping like stray curls. It's not history exactly, it's care, the gentle, domestic heartbeat of power. You end the manuscript with a single line. Even emperors need their mirrors cleaned. Days pass, blurring softly into each other. You no longer open the shop. You spend your hours near the fire, polishing your old scissors until they shine like moonlight. Once, a visitor leaves a bouquet of violets at your door. No note. You take it as a sign that stories, like scents, travel farther than bodies. Sometimes you catch yourself speaking aloud. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, sire? You said it'd make you immortal. The silence that follows feels like agreement. At night, you hear the sea again, though Paris is far from it. The waves roll inside your head, soft and patient. You imagine Elba, the tent, the palace, all merging into one vast, sleepy shore. You picture your scissors resting beside the comb, the last lock of hair glimmering faintly as though waiting for one more trim. The end doesn't frighten you. After all, every snip is a small goodbye. You lie back, close your eyes, and think of his reflection. The stubborn gleam, the impossible posture. Hold still, you whisper out of habit. The room answers with the soft hum of the city, the kind of silence that feels brushed and styled. And then, peace. Now slow your breathing. Let the story settle like dust after a long day in the salon. You followed a man's life not through battles or borders, but through the quiet ritual of scissors and trust, through the fragile grace of being near greatness and surviving it. Picture it, the empty chair, still faintly warm, the last strand of hair glinting in a slant of sunset. The tools are clean, folded, silent. Somewhere, the sea moves endlessly, whispering across time. You can almost hear it, the soft rhythm of waves against the hull of a ship, the click of metal on comb, the sigh of someone remembering what once was. Take a breath. Feel how every inhale smooths the tangles of thought, how every exhale loosens the knots of noise around you. The empire, the hair, the history, all fade into the background hum of sleep and peace. You imagine the hairdresser at rest, scissors finely stilled, his work complete. You imagine yourself there too, wrapped in calm, the story's end curling gently like a lock of hair around a finger.
Nothing left to trim, nothing left to chase. Just the quiet satisfaction of a life lived close to legend. Now, let the light dim and the hum of the world drift away. The story closes, softly, perfectly combed.